My grandmother gave my daughter a sapphire ring for her 15th birthday. My parents took it and said it belonged to the bloodline. She had barely finished unwrapping it. The box was still sitting on the kitchen table, that deep navy velvet catching the afternoon light, and my daughter's face, her whole face, was doing something I hadn't seen in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. My grandmother had driven 3 hours to be there. 79 years old, arthritic hands, and she still made that drive alone because she said she wouldn't miss it for anything. The ring was old. Oval sapphire, silver setting, probably from the 40s. My grandmother had worn it on her right hand for as long as I could remember, and when she slid it off and pressed it into my daughter's palm, she said, "This goes to the girl in this family who reminds me most of myself." My daughter laughed and said, "I don't even know what that means, Grandma." And my grandmother said, "You will." That was a Thursday. By Saturday morning, the ring was gone. And my mother was standing in my kitchen telling me it wasn't theft. It was tradition. I'm Callum, 38, male. I need to set the scene properly because none of what followed makes sense without understanding who these people are and what the dynamic in my family looked like before everything collapsed. My grandmother, my father's mother, is one of those women who built herself out of nothing. Depression-era upbringing, married young, widowed young, raised 3 kids on a teacher's salary in rural Ohio. She had exactly 2 pieces of jewelry worth anything. A pearl necklace she gave my aunt when she got married, and this sapphire ring. She'd told me the ring story once, briefly, the way she told most stories, like she was giving you a small piece of something and trusting you not to drop it. Her own mother had given it to her. Not because she was the oldest, not because she was the favorite, but because her mother had seen something in her. A particular kind of quiet stubbornness, she said. The kind that keeps a person standing when everything else falls. My daughter has that. I've watched it her whole life. She's 15 and she's already the most grounded person in our immediate family, which is either a compliment to her or an indictment of the rest of us. Probably both. My parents, my father and mother, live about 40 minutes away. My father is my grandmother's middle son. The dynamic there has always been complicated in ways that I spent most of my 30s finally naming clearly. My father is the kind of man who believes family loyalty is a one-way door. You give it to him. He doesn't owe it back. He's not cruel exactly. He's just profoundly certain that he is the center of any room he's in, and that certainty has never once been seriously challenged, because my mother has spent 40 years making sure it wasn't. My mother is the enforcer. That's the most accurate word I have for it. She is organized, strategic, and utterly devoted to the idea of the family as a unit. But the unit has a very specific shape, and that shape is whatever is most convenient for my father's comfort and their shared self-image. She is the one who makes the calls, sends the texts, arranges the holidays, and quietly redirects any inheritance, any gift, any resource toward the version of events she finds most acceptable. I had not, until that Saturday, understood how far she was willing to take that. My parents had not been at my daughter's birthday party. My mother had called the week before and said they had a prior commitment, some fundraising dinner at their church. I'd said fine. I wasn't going to beg them to show up. My grandmother had come. My wife's parents had come. A handful of my daughter's friends. It was a good day. Genuinely good. The kind of day you hold onto. Saturday morning I was making coffee when I heard my daughter coming down the stairs and I could tell from the sound of her feet. I know my kid, I know her footsteps, that something was wrong. Not injury wrong. Quiet wrong. She came into the kitchen and her face was flat in that particular way teenagers go flat when they're trying not to show you something. "Dad," she said, "the ring isn't in my room." I turned around. "What do you mean it's not in your room? Where'd you put it?" "On my dresser. In the little dish where I keep my stuff. It was there last night. Maybe it fell." I looked. "Dad, it's not there." I went upstairs with her and we looked. Under the dresser. Under the bed. In the dish. In her jewelry box. In the bathroom. It was gone. And here is the thing I didn't understand yet. My parents had stopped by the evening before. My mother had texted around 7 saying they felt bad missing the party and wanted to drop off a card and a gift card for my daughter. My wife had let them in. They'd stayed maybe 20 minutes. My daughter had thanked them. They'd gone upstairs briefly, my mother saying she wanted to see the room redecoration my daughter had done. I had thought nothing of it. I thought about it now. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was expecting the call. Callum. Mom, did you go into my daughter's room last night? A pause. Not a confused pause. A prepared one. We said hello to her. Did you take anything from her room? Another pause. Then, I think we need to talk about this in person. That sentence. That specific sentence. I've learned over the years that my mother only wants to talk in person when she has calculated that her physical presence gives her an advantage. She can read a room. She can modulate her voice, her posture, her tears. On the phone, she loses those tools. So when she says she wants to talk in person, she means she wants to talk on her terms. Tell me on the phone, I said. Yes or no? Do you have the ring? She exhaled. It's more complicated than that. It's a yes or no question. Callum, that ring has been in the family for. Mom. For generations, and your grandmother, I love her, but she is not thinking clearly about what that ring represents to thee. Did you take the ring from my daughter's room? Silence. Then, your father and I felt it was best to. I hung up. I stood in my daughter's room for a moment. My daughter was watching me. She was trying to read my face and I was trying not to give her a face to read, but I could feel something moving through my chest. Not quite anger yet, something underneath anger, something colder and more structural. I'm going to get it back, I said. Dad, what's happening? Your grandparents took it. I'm going to get it back. She sat down on her bed. She was quiet for a moment and then she said something that stayed with me, something I kept coming back to over the next several weeks. She said, "They came to my party late so they could take it, didn't they?" I didn't answer immediately. Because she was 15 and I didn't want to be the person who confirmed to a 15-year-old that some adults are that calculated. But I also don't lie to my kid. So I said, I don't know yet. I'm going to find out. What I was already thinking, what I couldn't say out loud yet, was, yes. I think that's exactly what happened. My parents arrived at my house 40 minutes later. My mother had clearly called my father in the car because he had his peacemaker face on. That particular expression he wore when he needed to appear reasonable while she handled the actual mechanics of the argument. They sat at my kitchen table like they were doing me a favor by being there. My wife stayed in the room. She said nothing. She just sat with her coffee and watched, and I will tell you that my wife's ability to sit in silence during conflict is one of the most powerful things I have ever witnessed because it completely unnerves my mother, who needs an emotional audience to perform for. Callum, my mother started. We want to explain. Where is the ring? It's safe. We have it. Bring it back. My father shifted in his seat. Son, your grandmother is 79 years old. Her judgment was fine when she drove 3 hours to be here. Her judgment was fine when she had a conversation with my daughter that made complete sense. Her judgment is fine. Don't do that. She gave away a family heirloom, my mother said, and her voice had that particular steadiness that meant she'd rehearsed this. To a child. Without consulting anyone. It's her ring. She doesn't have to consult anyone. It belongs to the bloodline, Callum. My mother set her hands flat on the table. That's not a metaphor. That ring has passed through this family's women for 3 generations. It is not a birthday present. It is a legacy piece and it should go to someone in the direct line. Your daughter. She stopped herself. I looked at her. Say it. She pressed her lips together. Say it, I said again quietly. My father looked at the table. My mother said, Your daughter is not a blood relative of your grandmother. She's adopted. We love her. But the ring belongs within the biological line. There it was. My daughter was adopted. We adopted her when she was 3. She has been my daughter in every sense of that word for 12 years. My grandmother knew this. My grandmother had known this since the day we brought her home, and not once, not in 12 years, had my grandmother treated her as anything other than her great-granddaughter. And 3 days ago, my grandmother had driven 3 hours to give her a sapphire ring and told her she reminded her of herself. I kept my voice level. I have thought about that a lot since. How I managed to keep my voice level. I think it was because I understood in that moment that if I lost control, my mother would use it. She would reframe the conversation as me being irrational. So I kept it level. "Get out of my house," I said. "Leave the ring on the table." My mother blinked. "Callum, leave the ring on the table and get out of my house. We are trying to protect the integrity of... You broke into my daughter's room and stole a gift that was given to her by her great-grandmother. That is what happened. I am not going to debate its framing with you. Put the ring on the table." My father reached into his jacket pocket. I hadn't expected that. I thought they'd argue more. But he set a small velvet box on the table. My mother's hand moved toward it, like a reflex, and he put his hand over hers. They looked at each other. Something passed between them that I couldn't fully read. Not quite disagreement, more like negotiation. Then he slid the box across the table to me. I picked it up, opened it. The ring was inside. "We want to discuss this properly," my mother said. "When everyone has calmed down. You had a conversation you should have had with me before you walked into my daughter's room. You chose not to. That decision is done. There is no more discussion." They left. My wife waited until the front door closed and then she said, without looking up from her coffee, "They're not done." She was right. She was exactly right. Because here is what I did not know yet, what none of us knew, was that my mother had already made a phone call. Before they came over. Before they returned the ring. She had called my uncle, my father's older brother, and she had called my grandmother's attorney, and she had planted a seed that was going to take 3 more weeks to fully bloom into something I was not prepared for. I took the ring upstairs and put it back in my daughter's dish. She was sitting at her desk pretending to do homework. "Got it back," I said. She looked at the ring. Then at me. "Are they going to try again?" I sat on the edge of her bed. "I don't know. Maybe. Because I'm adopted." I breathed. "That's what they said." "Yes." She nodded slowly. The way she processes things is so much like my grandmother it sometimes stops me. Quiet. Thorough. Like she's filing it properly before she reacts. She said, "Great-grandma knew I was adopted when she gave it to me." "Yes." "So she decided it anyway." "Yes." "Then it's mine." "Yes," I said. "It is." She put it on. Looked at her hand. Then she went back to pretending to do homework and I went downstairs and I called my grandmother. She answered on the first ring. "I heard," she said before I could speak. I paused. "How?" "Your uncle called me." "Your mother called your uncle." "Callum, I need you to listen to me carefully because I am not going to say this twice." Her voice was steady. Absolutely steady. 79 years old and she sounded like iron. "I gave that ring to your daughter. I made that decision with full mental capacity, full knowledge of the family situation, and full intention. I would like you to get me in touch with someone who handles these things legally, because I want it documented." I stared at the wall. What did Uncle say? A pause. He suggested that perhaps I should consider the ring's significance to the broader family. "What does that mean?" "It means your mother suggested to him that my judgment may be declining. And your uncle, who I love but who has never once in 60 years defied your father's version of events, agreed that a conversation might be warranted." I sat down. Hard. "Are they going to try to challenge your competency?" My grandmother was quiet for a moment. "I think they're considering it. I think your mother thinks if they can establish that I am not of sound mind, they can challenge the gift." I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. I have tried to describe it to people and the closest I can get is this. It felt like the floor of something gave way. Not dramatically. Just shifted. Like a structure I had trusted to hold turned out to be resting on something much thinner than I'd believed. My parents were going to try to argue that my grandmother was mentally incompetent. to get a ring back from a 15-year-old. Because she was adopted. "Grandma," I said, "I'm going to handle this." "I know you will," she said. "But Callum, I want you to understand something. This isn't really about the ring." I waited. "This has never been about the ring," she said. "The ring is just the thing they chose this time. Your mother has needed to control how this family is defined for 40 years. She decides who is in and who is out, who belongs and who doesn't. She decides what the bloodline means and who qualifies. That girl upstairs has never fit the category your mother made for her, and your mother has been patient about it because she had to be. But patience runs out." She paused. Then, "And there is something else you should know. Something I should have told you years ago. But I thought it would pass. I thought your father would. I don't know what I thought. Tell me." "Not on the phone. Come see me. Next week, come see me. Bring your daughter." I said I would. I meant it. I had no idea what she was about to tell me. But I remember the particular quality of that pause, the weight of it. And I remember thinking that whatever it wasn't small. I spent that Sunday doing something I had never done before. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and I wrote down everything I could remember about my parents' behavior over the past decade that had felt wrong. That had felt like pattern. I am an engineer by profession. I build things that have to function under load. I understand systems. What I was doing was looking at the system my family had been operating under and trying to understand the load-bearing elements. What was holding what up? What would fail first? The list was longer than I expected. Significantly longer. The time my parents had pressured my wife and me to put my grandmother's name off a small savings bond we'd set up for my daughter's college fund. To simplify things, my mother had said. We'd resisted. The time my mother had suggested, very casually, that perhaps we should think about whether adoption records should be shared with the broader family, when my daughter started asking questions about her biological parents. We'd said absolutely not. The time my father had made a comment at Christmas 3 years ago that my daughter heard about how real family showed up in ways you couldn't plan for. My daughter had been 12. She hadn't said anything, but she'd heard it. And further back, the way my parents had reacted when we first told them we were adopting. Not hostile exactly, just carefully distant. They'd been warm enough in the years since, but I understood now that warm enough had a condition attached to it. They were warm enough as long as she stayed in the category they'd assigned her. Guest. Addition. Loved but adjacent. Not bloodline. My mother had managed that boundary quietly for 12 years. The ring was the first time my grandmother had crossed it openly. I started making calls Monday morning. The first call was to a family law attorney. Not because I expected this to become a court case, but because I wanted to understand my options clearly. The attorney I reached, a woman who had been recommended to me by a colleague, was brisk and thorough. She asked me to describe the situation. I did. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "The gift was given. Your parents returned it when confronted. The ring is in your daughter's possession. Unless your grandmother is under a guardianship or conservatorship, which she is not, she had the legal right to give that gift to anyone she chose. Your parents have no legal claim." What about a competency challenge? If they want to pursue that, they would need to file a petition for guardianship or conservatorship in the county where your grandmother lives. It would require a medical evaluation, a hearing. It's not a fast process, and courts take it seriously. If they file frivolously, they open themselves to sanctions. How likely is it they'd pursue it? Without evidence of cognitive decline, not very. But determined families sometimes push anyway. The process itself can be weaponized to create pressure even if the case is weak. I thanked her. I asked if I could call back if things developed. She said yes. The second call was to my uncle. My uncle is 3 years older than my father. He and I have always had a cordial relationship. Not close, but decent. He'd been at my wedding. He'd met my daughter a handful of times. He was not a malicious person. He was, as my grandmother had said, someone who had spent 60 years not defying my father's version of events. He picked up, sounded surprised to hear from me. "I know Mom called you," I said. "I know what she told you. I want to hear what she said from your perspective." He was quiet. Then, "She said she was concerned about your grandmother making a large financial decision without consulting the family." The ring isn't a financial decision. It's a personal gift. She said it was a family heirloom valued at potentially significant. It's a ring. My grandmother gave it to her great-granddaughter. That's not a financial transaction. That's a grandmother saying she sees herself in this kid. Silence. "She also suggested," he said carefully, "that there might be some cognitive issues. That your grandmother had seemed not quite herself lately. Have you seen her recently?" "Not since Thanksgiving. I spoke to her 2 days ago. She was completely herself. She had a specific plan, she'd consulted legal options. She knew exactly what she was doing and why. Does that sound like cognitive decline to you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "It doesn't. I need you to not be part of this," I said. "I'm not asking you to pick a side. I'm asking you to not lend your name to something that could hurt your mother and your niece." Another silence. Then, "What is she planning?" "Your mother. I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Callum." He paused. "Your father, you know how he is. When your mother decides something, he follows. I'm not excusing it. I'm just telling you he's not going to stand up to her on this." "I know. And she has decided that ring belongs to someone else in the family." "Who?" He was quiet. "Who did she decide it should go to?" "Your cousin's daughter. Sarah's youngest. She turns 16 next spring." I sat with that for a moment. My cousin Sarah is my uncle's daughter from his first marriage. She and I are not close, but we're friendly. Her youngest daughter, I've met her twice. She is a perfectly nice kid who has no particular relationship with my grandmother. Your mother, my uncle said slowly, made some calls to Sarah last month. Before the party. I didn't know what she was calling about. But now, she'd already planned this. He didn't answer. Which was an answer. "Before the party," I said. "She'd already decided the ring should go to Sarah's daughter and she was waiting to see what my grandmother did with it." "I think so. Yes." I thanked him. I set the phone down. My wife was standing in the doorway. She'd heard enough. "She planned it," my wife said. "She planned it. She didn't go to the party because she didn't want to be there when your grandmother gave the ring. She went the next evening because she expected to walk in, have a conversation with your daughter about how special the ring was, and either walk out with it voluntarily or take it when my daughter wasn't looking." We stared at each other. "Callum," my wife said, "your grandmother said there was something else. Something she needed to tell you in person." "I know. Whatever it is, I think it's connected to this." I thought she was right. I was starting to think a lot of things were connected that I hadn't connected before. The pressure about my daughter's adoption records. The comment about real family. The bond. The years of cordial distance. And something further back, something I'd almost forgotten, a conversation I'd overheard between my parents when I was home from college for a weekend, something about my grandmother's house, about what happened to it when she died, about whether her wishes were realistic. I had filed that away as normal family friction. The boring, ambient selfishness of people thinking about inheritance. I was starting to understand it differently now. I drove to my grandmother's house the following Saturday. My daughter came with me. It's a small house in a small town, the kind of house that's been exactly the same for 40 years and that feels like it will outlast everyone. She had coffee ready. She had a tin of cookies my daughter likes. She hugged my daughter for a long time, and my daughter, who is 15 and usually mildly allergic to displays of affection, held on. We sat at the kitchen table. My daughter knew this was not just a visit. She's perceptive. She sat and listened. My grandmother put her hands flat on the table, a gesture I recognized from the phone call. She was steadying herself. "I want to tell you both something I probably should have said years ago. I didn't because I thought the moment had passed. And then I thought it would cause more trouble than it was worth. And then your parents did what they did. And I realized that my silence was making things worse, not easier. She looked at me. When your parents found out you were adopting, before you brought your daughter home, your mother came to see me alone. This would have been 12, 13 years ago. She sat in this kitchen, and she asked me to promise that the ring would stay in the biological line. I went still. She said she loved you and she supported your decision to adopt. She said she would treat your daughter as her grandchild. But she asked me to promise that the ring, and my house, and anything else of significance, would be designated for biological descendants only. She said it wasn't about love. She said it was about legacy, bloodline. What did you say? I said no. My grandmother's voice was steady. I told her that my family was my family and I would decide what that meant. She left angry. We didn't speak about it for several months. When she came back around, she was cordial. She dropped it. I thought she'd accepted it. She didn't drop it, I said. No. She's been waiting. She's been waiting 12 years for me to do something that would allow her to redefine things. And when I gave your daughter that ring, she decided enough was enough. I looked at the table. Then at my daughter, who was very still. What about the house? My grandmother looked at me for a long moment. She's already spoken to a lawyer, Callum. I found out through a friend, someone who knows the attorney your mother consulted, that she's been asking questions about whether a gift made while mentally impaired can be challenged retroactively, and about the probate process for property when there's no updated will. My stomach dropped. Your will. My will is 8 years old. It was written before some of these conversations happened, before I fully understood what your mother intended. It doesn't clearly designate everything the way I would want it to now. Does Dad know about any of this? She paused. For the first time in that conversation, she paused. Your father, she said carefully, is not an innocent party in this. I looked up. He knew what your mother asked me 12 years ago. He was in the car. He didn't come in, but he knew. And he has not once in 12 years told her she was wrong. My daughter put her hand over my grandmother's. Just that. No words. My grandmother looked at her hand and then at my daughter, and something moved across her face. Not exactly sadness, something more complex. Relief, maybe. Like she'd been holding something for a long time and had finally set it down somewhere safe. I want to update my will, my grandmother said. And I want to make sure the ring is legally documented as a gift already given. Completed. Not part of the estate. I can help with that, I said. I know you can. That's why I'm telling you. On the drive home, my daughter was quiet for a long time. Then she said, she's been waiting to do that for 12 years. The ring thing. She was waiting for Grandma to do something she could challenge. I kept my eyes on the road. Probably. That's a long time to wait. Yes. It means she decided I wasn't part of it before I even got there. I had no comfortable answer for that. I didn't try to find one. I said, my grandmother decided you were part of it before you got there too. She's had 12 years of that same certainty going the other direction. My daughter thought about that. Then she said, is she going to be okay? Great grandma. I'm going to make sure of it. That was a promise I meant. And it was one I spent the next 3 weeks very carefully building the infrastructure to keep. The attorney I'd spoken to the week before agreed to take on the case in a formal capacity. What I needed was threefold. First, I needed the gift of the ring legally documented, a notarized gift letter from my grandmother confirming the transfer of the ring to my daughter, completed and irrevocable, signed while witnesses could attest to her mental clarity. Second, I needed my grandmother's will updated with an estate planning attorney of her choosing, someone my parents had no connection to. Third, and this was the part that took the most care, I needed to understand exactly what my mother had done and when, so that if she pursued any legal action, we were already 2 steps ahead. My grandmother's estate planning attorney, a woman in her 60s who my grandmother had been referred to through her church, met with her twice over 10 days. I was present for one of those meetings. My grandmother was precise, clear, unhesitating. She knew what she owned, what she wanted to do with it, and why. She answered the attorney's capacity screening questions with the kind of dry patience that made the attorney set her pen down and say, "Mrs., you are one of the sharpest clients I've had in here in recent memory." My grandmother said, "I know. The will was rewritten. It was thorough. It was witnessed. It was filed. The gift letter was notarized on a Wednesday. 2 witnesses. A clear statement of my grandmother's intent, her awareness of the ring's value, her relationship to my daughter, and the irrevocable nature of the gift. My attorney kept a copy. My grandmother kept a copy. I kept a copy. The original went in my daughter's name in a small fireproof safe in my office. Here is what I had not yet done. I had not called my parents. I had not responded to my mother's 2 texts asking if we could clear the air. I had not told my father what I knew. I was not ready. I was still building. My uncle called me during that second week. He'd had a conversation with my father, he said. My father had, this surprised me, expressed some discomfort with the direction things were going. Not enough to say anything to my mother. But he'd told my uncle privately that he thought maybe it had gone too far. Too far, I said. I know, my uncle said. He thinks stealing a ring from his granddaughter is maybe too far. He's not Callum, your father is not a brave man. I know that. Your mother told him that without clear documentation of your grandmother's intent, the ring status was legally ambiguous and she was simply preserving it pending clarification. She convinced him she was protecting the family from a potential dispute. She convinced him that stealing the ring was protective. I know how it sounds. Does he know she consulted an attorney about challenging my grandmother's mental competency? Silence. I don't think so. When he finds out, if he finds out, do you think it'll matter? A very long silence. I don't know, my uncle finally said. I genuinely don't know. That was the most honest thing anyone in my extended family had said to me in weeks, and I held on to it. The third week was the one I'd been moving toward without fully announcing it to myself. My mother sent a third text asking for a conversation. I texted back. Thursday. Our house. 6 o'clock. My wife raised an eyebrow. You're ready. I'm ready. What are you doing? I'm going to show them exactly what they built. And then I'm going to show them exactly what I built. She looked at me for a long time. Don't lose yourself in this. Whatever happens. I'm not going to. I mean it. The version of you that gets to feel satisfied at the end of this is the version that didn't become what they are. She was right about that too. She's been right about most things in this story, and I want to be honest about that because the narrative of the lone protagonist outmaneuvering the villain sounds cleaner than it was. My wife steadied me more than once. My grandmother steadied me. My daughter, just by being exactly who she is, steadied me. Thursday. 6 o'clock. My parents sat at the same kitchen table they'd sat at 3 weeks earlier. My mother had her composed face on. My father looked like he was trying to be somewhere else. My wife sat across from them. I stood. I did not start with the ring. I said, I want to tell you what I know, and then you can decide what you want to do next. My mother's composure shifted, almost imperceptibly. I told them about the gift letter, the notarization, the witnesses, the legal documentation of my grandmother's intent and capacity. I told them my grandmother had updated her will with an attorney they didn't know. I told them that I'd spoken to my attorney about the steps my mother had taken. Consulting an attorney about a competency challenge, calling my uncle, calling my cousin Sarah in the weeks before the party. My mother said, How do you know about Sarah? It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that I know the timeline. You decided the ring should go to Sarah's daughter before my grandmother made her decision. You went to her party the next evening with the intention of either persuading my daughter to give it up or taking it. You took it. That is not. That is exactly what happened. I have the timeline. I have witnesses. I have documentation. My father was looking at the table. What I also know, I said, is that you went to my grandmother 12 years ago and asked her to exclude my daughter from her estate. I know she said no. I know you've been managing this situation for 12 years, waiting for an opportunity." My mother's face had changed. It was still controlled, but something behind the control had shifted. "I'm not going to file a restraining order," I said. "I'm not going to pursue legal action for the theft unless you give me a reason to. But I want to be clear about what happens next. My daughter keeps the ring. My grandmother's estate is handled the way she has chosen to handle it. You will not pursue a competency challenge. Not because I'm threatening you, but because there is no competency to challenge. There are now multiple witnesses to her clarity, and if you file, you will lose and you will be sanctioned and the entire family will know exactly what you did." Silence. "And," I said, "I want you to understand something else. My daughter knows. She is 15 years old and she knows that before she set foot in this family, you'd already decided she wasn't part of the bloodline. That is not something I told her. That is something she figured out herself. You did that. Not me." My father made a sound. Low, involuntary. He put his hand over his mouth. "I love you both," I said. "I am not trying to end this family. But there is a version of this family that includes my daughter fully, completely, without asterisks, without conditions. And there is a version that doesn't. I will only participate in the first version. That choice is yours." My mother was very still. Then she said, "You've been planning this." "Yes. You let us think you were just sitting with it. And you were planning this. You planned for 12 years. I had 3 weeks. I think we both know who's better at this." My father stood up. He looked older than I'd seen him look before. He said, "Your mother and I, we need to talk. Privately." He looked at my mother. "We need to talk." My mother looked at him. For just a moment, just a second, I saw something in her face that I had never seen before. She was uncertain. She was calculating and she didn't like what she was calculating. They left without the ring. The conversation between my parents, whatever it was, I was not party to. But my uncle called me the following Monday and told me my father had, for the first time in his adult life, disagreed with my mother in a direct and unambiguous way. He'd told her enough. He'd told her that what she'd done with my grandmother 12 years ago, and the plans she'd been making in the months since, were not things he could support. My uncle said he'd never heard his brother use that tone. Not once. I don't know what that conversation cost my father. I don't know if he fully understood the weight of what had been done in their shared name. I suspect he understood some of it and chose not to look too closely at the rest. But he drew a line. Imperfect and late, but he drew it. My mother called me 2 weeks later. She said she wanted to apologize. I listened. The apology was partial. It addressed the ring, it addressed the distress caused to my daughter. It did not address the 12 years. It did not address the call to my uncle, or the call to Sarah, or the attorney consultation. I suspect she will never fully address those things because to do so would require her to look at the architecture of what she built, and I'm not sure she is capable of that. I said, "I hear you. I think my daughter would like to hear from you directly." She said she would reach out. She did. They met for coffee, my mother and my daughter. I wasn't there. My daughter came home and told me it was fine. Not great. Fine. My mother had said she was sorry my daughter had been caught in the middle. My daughter, who is 15 and made of the same quiet iron as her great-great-grandmother apparently was, had said, "I wasn't caught in the middle. I was the middle." My mother had no response for that. The ring is on my daughter's dresser. She doesn't wear it every day. Mostly she keeps it in the dish with her other things, and sometimes she puts it on and I see her look at it and I know she's thinking about what my grandmother said. About the kind of stubborn that keeps you standing. My grandmother is well. She has a new attorney. Her affairs are in order. She drives 3 hours less than she used to, but she calls every Sunday and the conversation with my daughter usually lasts longer than the conversation with me, which I consider a mark of success. My uncle and I talk occasionally. He's navigating his own version of this, what it means to have spent decades as a witness to something and not spoken. He's not there yet. But he's looking at it. That's something. My father and I have had dinner twice since. We don't talk about what happened directly. We talk around it, the way men in my family have always talked around the things that matter. But something is different. There's less performance on his side. Less of the certainty. I don't. Now if I'd call it growth, I'd call it quiet acknowledgement. He's still my father. He's still limited. But he sees my daughter now in a way I don't think he let himself see her before. He called her on her birthday last month. Just to talk. She came downstairs after and said, "That was kind of nice actually." That felt like something. My mother is harder. She's cordial. She's managed. She treats my daughter with a warmth that is deliberate and visible in a way that feels like proof of effort rather than instinct. Maybe effort is how it starts. I don't know. I keep the distance at a level I can manage without poisoning anything further. Here is the thing I come back to, though. The thing I can't quite stop turning over. My grandmother told me the ring went to the person who reminded her most of herself. The quiet stubbornness. The particular way of standing when everything else falls. My daughter got that from somewhere. She was 3 when we adopted her. Whatever she came from, whatever her biological history, she got that quality somewhere in her origin that I'll never fully know. Or, and I've thought about this, maybe she built it herself. Maybe 12 years of loving a family that contained people who'd already half decided she didn't fully belong gave her exactly the kind of backbone that ring was made for. My grandmother would probably say it doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is that it's there. She'd be right. So here is what I want to ask you. Because this is the part of the story where reasonable people disagree, and I think the disagreement is worth having out loud. When I sat down at that kitchen table and gave my parents the full account of what I knew, the documentation, the timeline, the attorney research, the calls to Sarah, was that the right thing? Some people I've talked to think yes, completely. They'd earned every word. Others have said I was cold. That I should have led with something softer and worked toward accountability rather than laying it out like a case to be decided. And the harder question, my mother's apology was partial. I accepted it. My daughter had coffee with her. We are all, more or less, operating in the same family system again. At different distances with different terms. There are people who think I should have gone further. Cut contact. Drawn a harder line. Demanded the full accounting of the 12 years, not just the ring. Maybe they're right. Maybe the compromise is too much. Maybe in 5 years I'll look back and think I gave too much ground. Or maybe this is what it actually looks like to protect your family without destroying the thing you're protecting. I genuinely don't know. I know what I chose. I know why I chose it. I know my daughter is okay. I know my grandmother is okay. I know the ring is where it belongs. That might have to be enough. If you've ever been in a family that made you prove you belonged, or watched someone you loved have to prove it, you know exactly what this story feels like from the inside. And if you haven't, I hope you never do. Stick around. Because the next time something like this happens in my family, and knowing these people, there will be a next time I'm going to need a place to put it. And apparently, so do you.